Life with type 1 diabetes is already hard, so sometimes the harder things in life can feel almost impossible. We might even convince ourselves that certain goals just aren't for us anymore. But today's episode is about pushing back against that idea and recognizing that there's actually something really powerful about discovering you can still do them, and that power carries through well beyond the goal itself. My name is Scott Johnson, and today I'm joined by Erika Szumel. Erika is part of the team here at Blue Circle Health, and she's training for another marathon with type 1 diabetes. Together, we're talking about what it really takes to build confidence, to adapt, and keep trying hard things, and what we learn about ourselves when we stop waiting to feel fully ready. But before we continue, I do need to remind you that we're not providing any medical advice or endorsing any specific product brands. We'll always encourage you to consult your healthcare team for personalized guidance. Erika, thanks so much for joining me today. Will you please get us started by telling our listeners a little bit more about yourself? How long have you lived with type 1 diabetes? A little more about your role here at Blue Circle Health?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today, Scott. For those of you that don't know, my name is Erika. I am 29 years old, and I've been living with type 1 diabetes since I was 4. So I actually celebrated my 25th anniversary of living with diabetes this past year, which was
amazing,
super exciting, and it was a happy, joyous celebration for me. But at Blue Circle Health, I am marketing coordinator, so I handle all things marketing, and I work closely with everybody on the CE team in terms of, working with the community and things like that.
Now, we're talking today because you ran your first marathon with Beyond Type Run back in 2022, which is amazing, but you recently embarked on another pretty big challenge, right? Tell us more about that.
Yes. So I recently signed up for the Philly Marathon that will happen in 2026 in November. So I have about 5 or so months to go until that race. But yeah, I signed up, I guess, about a month or so ago, and I am turning 30 this year, and it felt like a really good year to do something big. And that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, it's funny to me because I've heard you talk about your last marathon with Beyond Type Run as like a bucket list item, and here you are signing up for another one. Before we dig deeper into that, I do want to get something out of the way, right? Like, I have absolutely no interest in distance running. I've been there, I've done that, and I didn't like it. I have no plans on doing it again. And I actually would like to think that I'm not alone in that. And I don't want people like me who might be listening to tune out of this episode to think that we're, talking all about the nitty-gritty details of marathon training and things like that. But, for those who might be listening today who don't have interest in running a marathon, what do you hope that they might take away from our conversation today?
So what I will tell you, which will probably surprise some people who are listening or watching, is that when I signed up for that race in 2022, like I said, it was a bucket list item. And I really mean that. I had not run a single race before that day. I had never run a 5K. I had never done a half marathon, anything. I just went like 0 to 100. And that's kind of what happened for me. But so if someone's going to take anything away from this conversation today, I hope it's that you can feel and truly believe in yourself that no matter what you want to do in your life, no matter what kind of challenge, no matter what kind of obstacle or goal that you have, that you can do it with diabetes, and that doesn't matter who you are or how you do it or whatever you choose to do, but that you can definitely do it. Because I was in your shoes thinking, there's absolutely no way I want to run a marathon, and there's no way that I will ever be able to run a marathon. And I did it.
You did it, and you're going to do it again. That's inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into some of that, but I agree. Like, I think that one of the things we're going to talk about today is really just doing hard things with type 1 diabetes and lessons that you learned through doing these hard things that have carried through and are helping you in more ways with your diabetes. But let's back up a little bit with, before your first marathon and training, did you think of yourself as a runner or even particularly athletic?
So I have always been, I'd say, an athlete, or maybe we could say like a light athlete. I grew up dancing and I was like in ballet class 5 nights a week. And then as I got a little older in high school, I played volleyball, I did lacrosse, I did some different things, but I've always been active because, of course, like I knew since I was 4 that being active was important for life with diabetes, but I also really enjoyed being active in different ways. And yeah, so I would consider myself pretty fit at the time, but I was not a runner. I hated running for most of my young life. I really did. I hated it. And, I kind of would pick it up sometimes as I got a little bit older, just experimenting with different ways of exercise. But I never took it seriously to the point where I was like, increasing my mileage and really on a training plan. Like it was kind of a
Yeah.
very like here and there type of thing. But yeah, I would not have considered myself a runner before I started training for that race.
When you did start training, or even just thinking about training for this and running a marathon, with type 1 diabetes, what felt the most intimidating about it?
So 100% for me, the most intimidating thing was how am I going to run these long distances without going low the whole time or
Yeah.
without having to drive myself high for hours? Because, as exercise can sometimes make you go high, sometimes make you go low. And I had no idea of how my body specifically was going to react to running for 3-4 hours, for those very long runs that I would
Yeah.
eventually get to.
Yeah. And we're gonna kind of dig into some of what you learned through that process. But I think that's a very relatable concern, right? I would worry about the same thing. When I think about taking on doing difficult things like this, one of the mistakes that I often make is kind of waiting to feel like really fully prepared or fully confident before even trying. Did you experience that at all, or what was that like?
I don't, this might just be a me thing, but I've always just been very like, you know what? I'm not going to know unless I try, and everybody
Uh,
has to start somewhere. And I really, that's maybe just like as I've gotten older and like matured and learned from life, but I've always just tried to really be like, okay, if I want to do this, I need to put my back behind it and I need to
mhm.
just go for it and try not to judge myself, especially early on.
Yeah.
And I also just like wanted to lean into the idea that I was like taking on this challenge and it was exciting and fun and like something that I can look back on and be so proud of.
Hmm. Did you
As
feel like the one aspect of your first marathon was running with the Beyond Type Run team, and there was some fundraising happening, and it was like it seems to me that you might think there's a lot more skin in the game, right? With a team like that, did that play into your thinking at all?
Yeah, definitely. And it was really, there was a lot of camaraderie. There was so many people that I became friends with on the team that like helped me and answered my questions, and runners who like had run 4 marathons already, and like
Mm,
that really kind of helped give me more courage and I think confidence in what I was doing, because I was like, okay, I have all these examples of all these people who live with type 1 running marathons or races or triathlons or whatever. And there was also people just like me who are running their first one, who are just like
yeah.
getting out there and doing it. And that I think collectively really just like raised my spirits and was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing the training. I'm going to keep doing everything I can to get to that finish line. And all I wanted from that race, really, I had no PR or time or anything in my head. I was like, I just want to finish. I want to get across that finish line. I don't care if I'm crawling across it. I just want to get to the end standing and smiling. And I was very lucky that I did.
Yeah, that's amazing. You touched on something that is really one of the core things that I hope people take out of this episode is not doing it alone, right? You mentioned how valuable it was to have people, experienced runners that you could turn to and ask questions of, but also people just like you in that they were running their first marathon. And I imagine that provided a sense of comfort knowing that you were in this great team of people that you could turn to for help.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think that's, a lot more common today. And I think it's really amazing kind of what social media has done is like you can find groups almost anywhere, I think, to
Mhm.
my knowledge, to like exercise with, or, like you can go and take a group fitness class, or you can find a walking club or a running club if that's what you prefer. But like there are different options and you can find other people to do those things with. And I think that's so motivating.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there a moment where during your training you felt like, oh, yeah, totally, I can do this? Or was it a more kind of gradual process that you're building trust in yourself as you went through the training?
I was following a running plan through an app called Run with Hal, who's from Hal Higdon. He's like a very famous runner who has this app, and it was really easy to follow. But basically, I started just like getting my body back into running in April of that year. But my real marathon training didn't start till probably like June, July. So when I first started running in April, it was hard. Like, and
Oh,
they were short runs. They were between 1 and 3 miles, but because I was so just like not used to it and not really, confident in what I was doing at the time, it was hard. And I remember being like, man, this is a mountain that I feel like
yeah.
I'm climbing. But by the time I got to the actual marathon running training in like June, July, I felt so much more ready for it. And I think it was probably when I ran the first time I ran, for the most part, like jogged, ran, barely walked a 10-mile run. I was like, I can't believe I just did that.
Yeah.
I was so elated because I'm telling you, my whole life, younger me would have never believed that I could run 10 miles and I did it. And that was like, from there, it's like you just want to like see yourself do the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of chuckle as you mentioned the short runs and running a mile or 3 miles because like for a lot of us, running a mile is a huge accomplishment, right?
It
And
is. And
it's a
it's
big deal.
still, it will always be a huge accomplishment if that's what is a goal or a challenge for you. That's awesome. Walking or running.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you feel looking back on it that training for something like this big, did it change how you think about yourself or what you're capable with, especially with diabetes?
Yes. I mean, 100%. I learned so much that I never knew before, but I did really like learn so much about myself and what I'm capable of if I just put in the work and the consistency. Really, that's all it is. And it's like I saw it and I felt it happen. Like I was saying, those first few months, I was like, man, this is going to be rough. I can't believe this is like really what I'm going to do in November. And then it gets little by little, it gets easier and easier. And the more you go on, the more you kind of trust yourself and the more that you feel that confidence and you feel that like joy out of like, I just hit another mile and I didn't have to stop, or like I just
Yeah.
walked another mile and, I kept moving my body. It was huge. And it just taught me just to like trust myself and to be proud of the process. And it was so rewarding.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love to hear that. Do you think that this experience has changed how you approach other hard things in life, not necessarily, just athletic achievements?
Yes, I do think that it's made me approach things differently because I feel like once you accomplish something again that you've just been like working so hard for, it's maybe something that not everybody in their life gets to do or wants to do. It really just feels like such a moment of pride for me. And I look at other challenges now like I did a marathon. This can't be it might not be as bad as that was, and how how awful I felt that day by the end of the race and the weeks after the my legs and my toes and everything. But I feel like it just has genuinely given me the perspective of like no matter what it is, you can at the very least try to do what you want to do.
That's an encouraging outlook. I think that really kind of puts some wind in your sails even when you're having the hard days. Marathon training, it seems like just a constant process of like experimenting. How do you or did you personally like approach that trial and error process without feeling completely defeated by it? And what did that process teach you about like adaptability and confidence and trusting yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not going to lie. I definitely felt defeated because I think many of us do, especially when we take on challenges with diabetes. It's like, oh man, like I thought I did everything right. I listened to the tips and the resources and I tried really hard to follow what everyone was telling me to do. But of course, as we all know, no matter what somebody tells you about
Mm.
insulin or food or water, it's always going to be individual to each person. And so I definitely would get a little defeated at first. But then, as the time went on, I think I really just had to, like, I had to adapt because I was like, I'm not going to let all of these little like bumps in the road make this a bad process for me, or like just like put a cloud over what I was doing, because it
Yeah.
was such a big thing that I was taking on and I just wanted to stay positive in it. But it's just like diabetes, right? Like every day can be different and we could do the same exact things every day, but if we were to get down on ourselves every single day, that's like such a terrible way to live. And we all do. I do. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like I definitely get annoyed and mad at diabetes a lot of the time. But the more that you can just like, okay, this is what's happening today, and almost like laugh about it, you get a lot further.
Yeah. I love that I also see a lot of parallels in you describing what people say, like how things are supposed to work. And then you've got your real life experience. And I see a lot of parallels there in our diabetes as well, right?
Mhm.
We learn the facts, we learn the things. Our doctor teaches us XYZ, and then we go and try it. And it doesn't always work out that way, right? And we have to adapt. Do you think that there's anything that you've taken through your training when things don't go the way that you hoped, that and how do you avoid like that spiraling into that frustration or self-judgment? And I will be also the first to acknowledge that I do normally spend some time there before I pull myself out of it. But did you learn any tricks or shortcuts that help you sort of circumvent that process faster?
I don't think I learned any tips or tricks. I think it's really just a mental, real, just like similar to a marathon, right? Like diabetes, we could use the analogy that diabetes is a marathon, and
Yeah.
no matter what's happening during your race, you have to keep going. And that's just like diabetes, right? Like we all want a day off. We all want to stop having to worry about insulin or our blood sugar or whatever, but you just have to. You just have to keep going. And I think it was just really a mental like practice for me to be like, okay, well, whatever. Like I don't know. I guess we'll try again tomorrow, and but also feel your feelings. Like if you want to get mad
Yeah.
about it, get mad. If you want to get sad, get sad. Just don't let it ruin a week.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Did you encounter any big surprises or setbacks with your diabetes when you were running and training?
I don't know if it will be a big surprise for everyone, but I first started running and I would just take my pump off entirely. I would just take it off and leave it. And sometimes I would maybe give myself like my basal insulin before, or like half of it or something like that, so that I didn't just have no insulin on me. But for a while, I was just running without my pump. And there was a few reasons for that because I was like, well, I don't want the insulin right now,
Yeah.
and also because I didn't want to deal with it on my like waistband. Like I wanted to
Right.
run as little as possible and I still had to carry a bunch of snacks. So like I couldn't, avoid everything, but if I could at least remove one thing, it was just felt a little bit more like freeing, I guess, while I was running. But eventually I got to a point where I was like, maybe I should try running with my pump on. Maybe this will help me like kind of with the highs I was having mid to the end of my runs, and maybe I'm like getting a little bit too much on the side of driving myself too high and not being able to factor in the other things that could happen, right? Like um how exercise just does it sometimes itself, or how like adrenaline will kick in and raise your blood sugar or things like that. So I guess it was kind of a surprise to me that if I put my pump back on and I tried to let it do its thing and I worked with the algorithm, that it actually helped me in the long run. But at first I was so sure that not running with my pump was going to be the solution to my answers, and I was wrong.
Yeah. Well, I can also see why that would be an easy thing to think, because a lot of times when we're exercising, especially doing these long duration activities, it's common to think that we need to really, and we do need to really reduce our insulin. But there's a balance point, right? Because when you're doing an athletic event like this, it's hard to shift our mindset out of diabetes, because blood sugar is only one part of like keeping your human machine going for such a long time.
Right, exactly.
Well, it sounds like there's this process that I keep hearing in our conversation, that the confidence doesn't necessarily come from everything going perfectly, but it comes from like learning how to adapt when things don't go perfectly. Would you say that's fair? And what's your experience been with that? And has that carried through beyond your marathoning?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said there. I think the quicker you can adapt and move forward when you have the challenges and the bumps, the better. Like I said, I just think it keeps your mental health a little bit, more peaceful rather than letting it drag you down. And with marathon training or any sort of exercise in general, I think it's really the key is the consistency and finding the patterns and the trends as soon as you can, and then, tweaking them along the way. And with the long runs that I had eventually down the line, I think by the time I got to those, I was in a much better place of knowing, what my blood sugar was going to do, or how much insulin I should maybe have on board or not on board, or which snack to eat when, and things like that. There's so many details, obviously, like living with diabetes. And I think those two things can exactly drive parallels to each other. If you can adapt and move forward, the better that you'll be, and the more peaceful it will be too as a process.
Yeah, which I think that's an important part of living well with diabetes, is being sort of at peace with what's happening in your head. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is a great time to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to make this a little bit more practical, like what people can actually take away from this conversation and apply in their own lives, whether they're running the marathon of diabetes or some big athletic challenge. So we'll be back in a second. One of our favorite things here is sharing stories from people who've participated in the program. And I have one here from Amy, who's been living with type 1 diabetes for more than 55 years.
It's always been hard to stay on track with my monitoring, understanding how my insulin works best to support my blood sugars, getting enough support from my healthcare team, and affording all the medical supplies, doctor visits, and lab tests. In June 2025, I found Blue Circle Health through a friend's pharmacist. After my first Zoom call with Blue Circle Health, I knew I had made the best call ever to support my diabetes management. They gave me education, knowledge, and positive feedback to help me improve management that I had struggled with for so many years. At 57 years old, I learned I had severe osteoporosis. For that, I do weight training most days of the week. I play pickleball outside 2 hours a day, weather permitting. I teach pickleball to adults in a community education program. I wanted to have better control of high and low blood sugars when I was working out. Blue Circle Health Team tweaked the amount of insulin I needed to be time in range during my workouts with my carb ratios. That really changed things. The details of Blue Circle Health Team provided has been incredible. The kindness, support, evaluations, and delightful staff of Eleni, Sherry, Catherine, and Xanadu at Blue Circle Health have really changed my diabetes care for the better. I did the work, but Blue Circle Health guided me. In the past 6 months, my hemoglobin A1C dropped 2.5 points, and I lost 18 pounds. I am so thankful I connected with Blue Circle Health, and I hope others with type 1 diabetes will reach out to them too.
What a great message. Thank you so much for sharing, Amy. You don't have to run a marathon with the T1D community. There are many different communities to try all sorts of different hard things with. But if you are interested in running, it might be useful and helpful to help you find people who understand and can support you, as Erika mentioned. One option might start with joining a Facebook group like Type 1 Run or one of their local community groups. There are also marathon teams through organizations like Breakthrough T1D, American Diabetes Association, CWD, and Beyond Type 1. And while I can't speak from personal experience about joining these groups, I've had friends say it's been an incredible opportunity to do hard things alongside others with diabetes. Again, you don't have to figure it out alone. If running a marathon is the challenge you're looking for, find a community that works for you and go for it. Welcome back. So we've been talking a lot about confidence and experimentation and learning how to do hard things with type 1 diabetes. I'd love to spend the rest of our time making this as practical as possible for people. So for someone listening who feels maybe intimidated by trying something new with type 1 diabetes, whether that's a big athletic event like a marathon or something just in their life that's not athletic related at all, what's one small place that they could start?
First thing I will say is you don't need to climb the whole staircase. You just need to take the first step, and that's it. And you can decide after that first step if it's something you want to keep going with or if it's something you don't want to keep going with. But I think 99% of the time, once you do the first step, you're going to realize like, okay, I have, you have a feeling, you have an understanding of what it is that you're trying to take on. And you can take those next steps as slowly as you want to. They don't need to be quick. And you can really go from there. And I think that's something that a lot of people maybe get lost in their heads is that you can do the hard things with diabetes. You just think about it like one step at a time. And there are so many people out there that can help you if you'd like their help. And there are communities out there to share those goals or even just talk about the goals or challenges and see what you might learn and absorb from those people. And then you can go and take that challenge on.
Yeah, I love that idea of one step at a time, right? It's just, you don't have to figure out the whole puzzle, just the next piece or the first piece. That makes a big difference.
It's just like when, you talk to a doctor or a nurse or someone on your care team about your diabetes management and, you're trying to figure out so many things at once. Like, was it the food? Was it the insulin? Was it the exercise? Was it the water intake? Was it the time of day? Sometimes you just got to dial it back and you got to say, okay, what can we maybe realistically talk about today that we could either slightly change or implement, and you just do one thing at a time. If you try to change too much at once, right, it can be scary and overwhelming, and understandably so, but just one step at a time will always get you there.
Yeah, that's powerful. It sounds like a combination of just almost gritty determination along with a somewhat curious mindset.
This is funny because I just saw this quote yesterday on Instagram, and it said, life meets you at your level of audacity. So if you're willing to have a high level of audacity and ask for what you want, go for what you want, say it out loud, manifest it, however you want to interpret that life will meet you there and give you those things. And I truly believe that because I don't think I would have been able to sign up for the marathon, finish the marathon, run 2 half marathons after that without having that audacity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's taking brave steps is a big part of life, and sometimes a brave step with diabetes is having the audacity to eat breakfast in the morning and see what happens with that. Right? It's all relative. What would you say you've learned about preparation versus control? Right, and that's a tricky word in diabetes. Would you say there was anything that you learned about that whole preparation versus control aspect?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I actually think that living with diabetes impacted my marathon training because I was so used to being so prepared for everything.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, I couldn't, run all those runs or do the exercise or whatever without knowing where my blood sugar was and making sure I had, my insulin and my low snacks and everything. And I kind of feel like that's what gave me that hand there, was like life with diabetes had me so prepared. It is definitely a fine line between being prepared and being in control. And I know that word is very buzzworthy in the community. And I think the marathon training can also easily kind of dip into the control side of things, but I don't believe that that's real life. So I think for me, it's probably just like my hippie mentality that I'm just more like, like go with the flow versus like being really rigid about it. Because I remember there was plenty of times where, just like with living with diabetes, right, there was factors that I couldn't control, like, the weather or like the humidity, which of course impacted my blood sugars differently. There's so many factors, just like living with type 1, that you really can't control it all. You can control some of it, but you can't control it all. And that's something you just have to accept and keep going with.
Yeah, you mentioned going with the flow, and I think that that's actually a strong trait that helps a lot in life with type 1 diabetes. There's so many things that we can influence, and there's so many things influencing our diabetes for that hour, day, week, whatever. And sometimes we have to just go with the flow. So I think that actually it helps build a lot of resilience to know that there's going to be days like that.
Yeah, and it makes it a much more peaceful way of life, because again, I am all for feeling my feels and being mad and wanting to throw my pump out the window. But the more that you can be at peace with the ups and the downs, the better. And, just more happy I think your life will be.
Yeah. Did you have any days where things just didn't go well at all, to the point where you're like, all right, I can't do my training today, or, this is just a day with my diabetes where I'm stuck at 250 and nothing I can do will get it down, and I'm safe. I'm not like spilling ketones and stuff like that, but something's just not right here. How did you cope with those days where you like had to give up, at least for that day?
Those days were really frustrating. I'm not going to lie, because, as we've always said, people with diabetes can do anything that they want to do. But those days were very frustrating because it felt like on those days, the diabetes was just stopping me. It was just holding up its hand and saying, "Nuh-uh,
Yeah.
sister, not today." And I remember feeling really defeated. But I think what I would do is just be like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to just kind of push my training back a day, and we're just going to keep going with the schedule as best as we can. I wanted to be really mindful of, like I told you, I would take my pump off for a lot of my training, and then I would end up high. And it did get to some days where I was afraid of ketones and, potentially putting myself in some sort of danger after the run or even hours after the run. And so I think I started to become a lot more cognizant of that as I was, the months were going by. So especially if I was having highs earlier that day, then I'm probably wasn't going to run that day. And same thing with lows. If I kept going low all day, I was probably like, I'm not going to chance it. It just feels like my body needs to get this one out,
Yeah. Sounds like you learned a lot of valuable lessons, and you incorporated those learnings and lessons. It's a perfect example of adapting and kind of going with the flow.
A lot of patience is what I learned. It's like, you can't do it today. Okay. But I want to, but I can't,
Yeah. And also that there's no real benefit that comes from beating yourself up too much about those days.
Definitely not. I knew that if I was going to make it to the end of the process, that I had to accept the bad with the good and keep going. Yeah. But it still stung. It hurt. It was defeating. But at the end of the day, I got to finish what I wanted to finish.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, that brings, I think, us to a great point to start wrapping up. So if someone listening today has been maybe holding themselves back from something big because of diabetes, athletic or not, what's one thing that you would want them to remember and think about?
Living with diabetes is already an incredible challenge that you take on every single day, and it's invisible and people can't see this massive challenge that you take on. Anything else is nowhere near as challenging as diabetes is. So you can absolutely do it. Just remember, you just have to take one step.
Just one step. That's a great takeaway. Well, we really focused in today on a lot of the emotional aspects of doing hard things with type 1 diabetes. But a while back, Erika, you were a guest on the amazing Ginger Vieira and Tara Miles show called the Diabetes Nerd Podcast, where You shared a lot of the more like nitty-gritty details about training for the marathon and fueling and dealing with leg cramps and so much more. Folks, if you want to hear more about that side of things, I highly recommend checking that episode out. I'll be sure to link it in the show notes. Erika, thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
Thanks for listening today. One thing I really loved in this episode is that confidence with type 1 diabetes usually isn't something that we start with. It's something that we build through experience, experiments, tough lessons, taking our knocks, and learning how to adapt when things don't go perfectly. If you take one thing from this episode, I hope it's this. You do not need perfect blood sugars or perfect confidence before you're allowed to try something meaningful. And maybe the goal isn't eliminating uncertainty completely. Maybe it's just learning how to trust yourself enough to keep going and take that first step anyways. If this conversation was helpful, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep living well with T1D.